Hi everyone, welcome to your channel, Virgo. Um, you're at a crossroads right now that requires your full attention. And the reason this feels serious is because the choice you're facing isn't small. It's one of those decisions that determines the direction of your life for the next chapter. Not every moment carries this much weight, but this one does. And somewhere inside, you already knows that. You can feel the gravity of it, the sense that what you do next matters more than usual. Let me describe what this feels like. You may have been treating the situation casually, telling yourself you have time, that you can figure it out later, that it's not as urgent or important as it actually is. Some people minimize serious moments because acknowledging the seriousness creates pressure. It's easier to pretend something's low stakes than to face that it's actually life changing. You might feel like you've been in denial, not dramatically, just subtly downplaying the magnitude of what's happening, keeping things light when they're actually heavy, avoiding the depth because depth is uncomfortable. But the seriousness isn't going away just because you're not looking at it. And pretending it's not serious doesn't protect you, it just leaves you unprepared. Let's pause here. This reflection invites you to consider, what situation in your life have you been minimizing that actually deserves your full, serious attention? Maybe it's a relationship that's reached a critical point. You can't keep going the way you've been going. Something has to change. Someone has to decide. The middle ground is disappearing and you're being forced to choose one side or the other. You may have been avoiding that choice, hoping the situation will resolve itself, hoping clarity will just appear without you having to do the hard work of creating it. It's possible the situation is professional, an opportunity that requires commitment, a risk that requires courage, a change that requires letting go of security. Or maybe it's personal, your health, your mental well-being, your living situation, something that's been slowly deteriorating and you've been managing it instead of addressing it. Some people manage problems indefinitely. They adapt to dysfunction. They normalize what should be alarming. They convince themselves that barely coping is the same as being fine. You may have been doing that. And your system is trying to tell you that barely coping isn't sustainable, that managing isn't solving, that this situation requires serious intervention, not continued tolerance. It can feel overwhelming to acknowledge how serious something actually is. Like once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. Like admitting the seriousness obligates you to act. And you're right, it does. That's exactly why you've been avoiding looking at it directly. This reflection invites you to consider, what are you afraid will be required of you if you acknowledge how serious this is? There's something specific about why this is serious now. Um, it's possible you've reached a point where inaction is becoming its own decision, where not choosing is actually choosing the default, where avoiding the crossroads means you're being carried down a path you didn't actively select. You may have been buying time, telling yourself you'll deal with it when you're more ready, when circumstances are more favorable, when you have more information. But time isn't neutral. Every day you don't decide is a day lived in the consequences of indecision, and indecision has its own costs. Some people think not choosing is safe, that as long as they don't commit to a direction, they're not responsible for the outcome, that staying in limbo protects them from regret. You may have been operating from that logic, but limbo isn't safety, it's just slow motion suffering. It's the anxiety of unresolved tension. It's being stuck in the question instead of moving toward an answer. And limbo has an expiration date. Eventually, circumstances force the choice anyway, and forced choices are almost always more painful than chosen ones. It can feel like you're being rushed, like you should have more time, like life is being unfair by demanding a decision before you feel ready. But readiness doesn't come from waiting, it comes from deciding. You don't become ready and then choose. You choose and become ready through the choosing. This reflection invites you to consider what would change if you stopped waiting to feel ready and just decided. Let me talk about what makes a moment serious versus casual. It's possible serious moments are the ones where multiple paths diverge significantly, where choosing one means fundamentally not choosing another, where there's no going back to the fork after you've walked down one road for a while. You may have been in situations before where choices felt reversible, where you could try something and if it didn't work, easily return to where you were, where the stakes were low enough that mistakes were just learning experiences. This isn't one of those situations. This is the kind where the choice creates momentum in a specific direction, where reversing becomes increasingly difficult the further you go, where the stakes are high enough that mistakes have real consequences. Some people treat all choices the same. They apply low stakes thinking to high stakes situations. They use, I'll just see what happens, when they should be using, I need to think this through carefully. You may have been doing that, treating this serious moment with casual energy, hoping that keeping it light will somehow make it less heavy. But the weight is real whether you acknowledge it or not. And treating serious things casually doesn't make them casual. It just means you're navigating something important with insufficient care. It can feel uncomfortable to take things seriously, like you're being too intense, like you're overthinking, like you should just relax and let life unfold. But some moments require intensity, require careful thought, require treating them with the respect they deserve. This reflection invites you to consider, are you treating something casual that actually deserves serious consideration? There's something about what you need to do with this seriousness. It's possible you need to stop distracting yourself. Stop filling your time with noise. Stop avoiding the quiet where real thinking happens. Stop running from the discomfort of sitting with a hard choice. You may have been keeping yourself busy as a strategy. If you're always occupied, you never have to face what's actually happening. You never have to think deeply about what you actually want or need. Some people use busyness as anesthesia. They numb themselves to serious situations by never giving themselves space to feel the full weight of them. You may need to create that space deliberately. Turn off distractions, cancel plans, sit with yourself and the decision that needs making. Give it the time and attention it requires. It can feel indulgent to prioritize thinking, like you should be doing something productive instead of just sitting with your thoughts. But thinking about serious things is productive. It's some of the most important work you can do. It's how you avoid making decisions you'll regret. How you ensure you're choosing consciously instead of defaulting unconsciously. What you might need to do is get advice from people who face similar crossroads, not to let them decide for you, but to learn from their experience, to understand consequences you might not have considered, to gain perspective you don't have from inside your situation. Some people refuse to seek input because they're afraid others will tell them what they don't want to hear. They'd rather make a decision in isolation than face inconvenient truths. You may have been doing that. Keeping this situation private because talking about it would make it more real, would invite perspectives that might challenge the story you're telling yourself. But outside perspective can be clarifying, can show you blind spots, can ask questions you haven't asked yourself. It can feel vulnerable to admit you're facing something serious, like you should have it figured out already, like needing help means you're failing. But everyone needs help with serious decisions. No one sees clearly from inside their own situation. Getting perspective isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Let me talk about what happens if you don't take this seriously. It's possible you make a choice without fully considering the implications. You pick a path because it's easier or more comfortable or requires less courage, and then you have to live with consequences you didn't adequately prepare for. You may end up with regret, not just I wish I'd chosen differently regret, but I didn't even really choose. I just let things happen regret, which is deeper, more painful. Some people spend years recovering from decisions they made casually that deserve serious consideration. They look back and think, if I had just taken that moment more seriously, my whole life would be different. You may be at one of those moments where 10 years from now you'll look back and see this as the turning point, the moment that determined your trajectory. And the question is whether you want to look back and see that you showed up fully for it, that you gave it the attention it deserved, that you chose consciously instead of defaulting unconsciously. It can feel dramatic to think about future regret, like you're catastrophizing, like you're making things bigger than they are. But some things are big, some moments are dramatic, and recognizing that isn't catastrophizing, it's just seeing clearly. You remain in complete control of how seriously you take this moment. You can keep minimizing, keep avoiding, keep treating it casually, or you can acknowledge the weight, face it directly, give it the serious attention it requires. The power is yours. It always has been. You may notice reading this has brought up a specific situation that, deserves more attention than you've been giving it. Maybe anxiety about what fully facing it will require. Maybe clarity that you've been avoiding something important. Whatever it is, honor it. Take what resonates. Softly release the rest. Trust yourself. Before we close, I want to ask you something. What situation in your life have you been minimizing that you know is actually serious? You don't have to share, just name it to yourself. And this, what would it look like to give it the serious attention it deserves? This is serious. Not to scare you, not to create unnecessary pressure, but because treating serious things seriously is how you make choices you can live with. This is a crossroads. This is a moment that matters. This is a choice that will shape what comes next in significant ways. And you get to decide whether you show up for it fully, whether you give it the weight it deserves, whether you choose consciously or let circumstances choose for you. Not eventually, now. Trust yourself with this. Trust that you're capable of handling serious decisions. Trust that taking something seriously doesn't mean panicking. Trust that you can face hard choices and make them well. I'll see you in the next one. And listen, serious moments deserve serious attention. Stop minimizing. Start facing it. This matters. Treat it like it does.